Hello all. So it's my turn now to take you through the UN Memorial, which was an entry we had back in 2007 for a competition that we managed to get the third prize for. A little bit, if you don't know who we are and what we do, we are a company making everything, or not? Yes. So we are a company making everything with offices in London, Berlin, and Madrid. So we have an international team that works across our three offices. The project I'm going to show you now is done by London. And as a practice, we worked on different scales, from master planning architecture to small-scale projects. And we started in 2007, so that was one of our first projects that we worked on. It's a project, it's a competition for the United Nations Memorial in Korea. So that was effectively a project that, from a competition, it got materialized for one of the peace parks, as they call them. It was proposed to be a building that would host a conference center, some educational facilities, some open spaces, cafes and restaurants, and it would be central to the park that was designated to the United Nations in the region of Chungju, if I say it correctly, in Korea. So starting with our concept and how we started working around it, it was very important, the location of the project itself, of the building in the park. So the idea was to have a primitive shape that would allow us to make a focal point for the whole master plan that was orbiting around it, starting from searching from a pyramid, a sphere, or a rectangle, and trying to understand a little bit what each of them reflects to the audience. You know, the pyramid traditionally is not very inviting, the sphere is inward looking. So we moved more towards something that can sit within our context, north-south, which was the original master plan orientation. Started with a simple cube and started to think of how we can actually make use of this primitive shape to create the space that the programmatic uses were requiring. Our, let's say, initial idea orbits around the cells, the same way like the United Nations. We're talking about a lot of nations that coexist and through all conflicts and not, settle in a way of being, as you can see on the slide. We realized that we could use the same mechanisms and start applying it to our primitive box, shaping our facades north to south and east to west, and creating those shells, each of them allowing a different function to be hosted in it, but at the same time bringing into the whole structure of the building the flexibility to grow each of the cells. So as a result, the programmatic use according to the needs of the future, because United Nations is an organization that evolves. It started with only 50 members, now it's over 200. And through that, trying to use also the material that we would use on the facade to kind of filter the different uses. This is one of the models that was part of the submission, so you can see how the shells are reflected on the facade around all the four edges, and how different opacity allows for different uses to be hosted behind, giving us a little bit of redundancy when it comes to the space and how you can use the space moving through it. At the same time, trying to route the design to the actual place. We got inspired by Korea, and in particular the sixth national treasure, which is this pagoda that you see here. And we tried to internally have a reference to the place by reverting it to a very big void that allows us to connect the spaces vertically and give us the idea of being able to look up into the sky, and allowing us from the main hall that, as I will take you through, lands on the ground floor of the building, to look up and be able to see the sky and see through the various uses the roof. Similarly, connecting east to west and north to south, two big voids, allow the building to orient itself and have unobstructed views to the landscape, whether it's the park on the lower one, whether you're still within the foliage, or higher up where you can see the whole valley that is further on the horizon. So this is the initial model where the shells and the voids can be identified, and the central void sits in the middle of our rectangle, with a section that allows the main ground floor, which is the assembly hall, the main use of the building, to grow up, having views from the assembly up without being really able, because of the tilted facade, to identify the uses. Whereas the uses, when you're within each of these rooms, whether it's an educational or whether it's the exhibition hall, you can look down and mimic a little bit the transparency in the way the UN Nations wants to work towards. These are the two directions of our section. So our void creates all these tilted glass with the frit. So when you're sitting in the assembly hall looking up, like the render we showed you earlier, you can see the reflective golden mirror frit to the sky. Our side plan had a very nice lake on the north and an extensive greenery right and left. So the master plan indicated the exact position of the building that we couldn't really challenge. Therefore, we tried to work with the context and allow the entire ground floor to be transparent and open, where the main assembly hall sits. The main assembly hall is the heart of the building, and we wanted it, similarly to the one they have in New York, be open and be the root of the whole building, whereas we have shifted above all the other uses, including the ticket hall, the cafe, the entries, and so on. As you can see, the transparency of the ground floor is only interrupted by the main circulation that is pulled on the perimeter of the building, highlighted in yellow in these renders. And there is no barrier, effectively, from entering from the ground floor straight into the assembly hall, while reflecting this transparency that UN Nations is about. At the same time, we start from the ground floor without any barrier or door, going up the stairs and along the perimeter, as you can see here on the plan, starting from the ground floor, going up with a stair that moves around all the perimeter spaces and allows for the visitor to explore the various uses of the building, that they can work independently from each other. So the circulation is pulled out. We have educational spaces and secondary uses. As we move up, double height spaces appear, mimicking the cells that we have from the facade that gives us double height spaces. And then we reach the fourth floor, where we have one of our through voids, east to west, where I'll stay more on the visual just because it's easier to explain and understand. The circulation passes through on the side, while this allows for movement of the public to be able to occupy the space and own the space, with views east-west where you have over the park, and at the same time have a sheltered corner where people can actually sit and enjoy, whether it's the exhibition space that is adjacent or just a spill out of the public realm that we have further down, just on an elevated level. This is 2-story high, and then we have the other void north to west. We are now above the foliage on the level 6 and 7, where you can actually appreciate the landscape that sits around this memorial, that it's effectively part of a master plan and a landscape, but it's still like a place that we see as a functional building that can adapt, with users being able to move freely around without tickets required as you move in and out. You can see how this corner is effectively the southwest, where you can wrap around and move up until you reach the top levels, where effectively we have the big garden. It's more like an encased garden, so the views are not necessarily out. They are more towards the sky. And depending on where you are in our 3 public spaces, the 2 voids below and the one we have here on the roof, you're able to appreciate and use the building in different ways. So fully open to the public. The uses around it can change. We can have on the ground floor at the assembly a school event, while the exhibition is occupied by something else. So this is the main, let's say, bird eye view that you can see, where the crowd from the top moves around and kind of flows around the building, while the spaces themselves are hosted within the original cells that reflect what UN Nation is about, while our central void is hidden in the middle and just allows the various uses to overlook at each other. Thank you.